Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the franchise discussion category. This video will be dedicated to the recap and thoughts for the Codename Kids Next Door TV movie, Operation Zero. We begin this TV movie with number one narrating about a story that involves, in his words, a boy, a book, and a tree. After number one's brief narration, we see events from the past that involve a time when a great evil ruled the world. During this time, there were a great number of old-fashioned tapioca factories, and kids were forced to work in these tapioca factories. One day, we see two boys running out of one of these factories, and they run up a tree, and we find out that these two boys are actually brothers, and they're the sons of the one responsible for this great evil. The younger brother tries to tell his older brother that it's unwise to anger their dad, but the older brother tells his younger brother, while also revealing his younger brother's name to be Ben, that he's tired of their dad's evil rule, and he wishes that there was a way that they could fight back against him. And when he says this, the older brother kicks the trunk of the tree, which opens up a doorway, and the brothers fall through this open doorway, and they end up on a slide, which leads them into the deep innards of this tree. The end of the slide takes the brothers to a chamber with items that they aren't familiar with. Ben is nervous about these items, but the older brother is amazed by them, and eventually he finds a book. This is the book of KND, and the older brother reads through the book and he likes what he's read. He says that this book contains instructions about building tree houses, building 2x4 technology, and it even includes pages so that kids can write their own stories within the book. The older brother tells Ben that this is what they need. This is the hope that they were looking for to defeat their dad. We then get to hear the voice of their dad, voiced by Neil Ross, who shouts for his son's whereabouts. Or yes, he shouts to find out where his sons are right now. Ben becomes rather nervous. Ben says something along the lines about how his older brother has zero chance of defeating their dad. The older brother responds, though, that they can defeat their dad, but they need to work together. And the older brother offers a handshake to Ben. Ben is hesitant, and he looks nervous, but it looks like he ultimately is going to shake hands with his older brother. But then we hear their dad's voice once again shouting for his sons with regards to their whereabouts, and Ben decides not to go through with his older brother's plan. He simply apologizes to his older brother before leaving. The older brother's response, though, is yes, the older brother says that if Ben thinks that he has zero chance of defeating their dad, then he will show them what the number zero means. And the older brother also sees a pair of sunglasses and he decides to wear them. The older brother now calls himself Numbuh Zero. We eventually see that Numbuh Zero has managed to find some kids that have agreed to help him rebel against his dad. We, the viewers, don't get to see the faces of these other kids. They're hidden in the shadows. But in any case, we do see Numbuh Zero and these other kids working together to free the kids that are working in the tapioca factories, and they also use 2x4 technology weapons to destroy the tapioca factories. But soon, Numbuh Zero and Ben's dad makes his presence known, and we get to see him. The dad of Numbuh Zero and Ben, he looks like a living silhouette, like father, although his appearance is more that of a tall, elderly man. So yes, a tall, elderly man silhouette. That's the best way I can think to describe the dad of Numbuh Zero and Ben. Numbuh Zero and Ben's dad tells Numbuh Zero that he's going to give Numbuh Zero till the count of 3 to go to his room. And he does count down, but yes, he counts down from 3 rather than counting up to 3. So yes, the dad begins to count down, and when the dad says 1, Numbuh Zero says 0, and he uses a 2x4 technology device to attack his dad. And then afterwards, the screen goes dark, and we hear Number One's narration again. Yes, Number One begins to narrate again, and Number One explains that Numbuh Zero was the founder of the 7th age of the kids next door. And the screen then begins to show Number One, and we see that Number One is on the moon base while he continues his narration. Number One says that there are some out there who think, yes, there are some, according to Number One, who act dismissive towards the existence of Numbuh Zero and the Book of KND. According to Number One, these individuals just write off Numbuh Zero and the Book of KND to be mere myths. Number One clarifies, however, that he believes Numbuh Zero and the Book of KND exist, and he's determined to find the Book of KND. But Number One says that there are only 5 words he wishes to write in the Book of KND. Those 5 words are, according to Number One, I am kids next door. After the narration, Number 86 receives a message, and she requests Number One's presence. And she gives instructions to Number One, and we see Number One grabbing a cylinder-shaped package. Number One then reunites with his teammates, and they all go into a 2x4 technology vehicle to head off to the location that this message came from. This message came from a museum, but not an ordinary museum. This is a museum dedicated to the Kids Next Door organization. And the one who sent the message is the curator of the museum, Number 101. So we see that at the museum, we see that Number 101 is in the middle of giving a tour to several Kids Next Door operatives. I believe that they are relatively recently recruited operatives. Some of the operatives are Number 83 and Number 84, Sonia and Lee, and also Number 363. He is the younger brother of Number 362. Soon enough, Number One arrives at the museum, and most of the operatives are impressed to see Number One has arrived. Number 101 is especially excited that Number One has arrived. We do hear at later points in the TV movie, Number One and his teammates call Number 101 a fanboy. And Number One does give Number 101 the cylinder-shaped package, and Number 101 opens it, revealing an ice cream cone. And Number One is baffled and frustrated that Number 101 used up Number One's time and resources from the organization for an ice cream delivery. Number 101 responds that Number 86 said that it was okay. Number One grumbles that he's going to leave now, and he tells Number 101 not to contact him again unless there's an actual emergency. After Number One leaves, Number 101 proceeds to continue the tour to the relatively recent recruits, or the operatives that relatively recently joined, that I believe is the case, yes. So Number 101 gives the operatives a tour of the museum. And Sonia notices there's one device that on display that Sonia notices and catches her interest. Number 101 explains that this is the recommissioning module. He says that this device is capable of restoring lost memories, including decommissioned Kids Next Door operatives. Number 101 also explains, however, that the recommissioning module was damaged beyond repair. This happened during a rebellion that happened some time ago. But after that, Number 101 decides to continue the tour and show the operatives another device. And they pass by some statues of members of the Rogues Gallery. These statues include statues of Mr. Boss, Nightbrace, the Crazy Old Cat Lady, Count Spankulot, Grandma Stuffum, the Ice Cream Men, and Professor Triple Extra Large, who has beaver traits. And number 101 also mentions that these statues are made out of the earwax of another Kids Next Door operative. But when they pass by the Nightbrace statue, we the viewers see the eyes of the Nightbrace statue looking around. Eventually, number 101 shows the operatives he's giving a tour. Yes, the operatives being given a tour of the museum are shown a device that number 101 has been working on. Number 101 describes it to be a DNA tracker, and he says the purpose, or he says all you have to do is find an item that contains DNA of any particular Kids Next Door operative, and with that DNA you can track the whereabouts of said operative. Number 101 admits that part of the reason for why he created the DNA tracker is because he's hoping to find out the true identity of Numbuh Zero. But number 363 acts dismissive towards Numbuh Zero's existence, and he mentions that his older sister, number 362, also thinks Numbuh Zero is a mere myth. Number 363 then comments that Numbuh Zero is as real as the Nightbrace statue that they just passed by. But when they look over, they see that the Nightbrace statue is no longer present. And then we soon find out that the statue was not actually a statue, but the real Nightbrace. And that's not all. The other statues are actually the real villains posing as statues. They're trying to attack the museum. The operatives present do try to, yes, the present operatives do try to fight back against the villains, but they are eventually overwhelmed. And number 101 does manage to send an emergency message to the Sector V operatives. Number 4 receives the message, and he tells number 1 that number 101 insists that this is an actual emergency. Number 5 also receives a message from the moon base, and number 3 receives a message from Lizzie. Number 1 decides to listen to the Moonbase message first. So the video call with Moonbase activates, and we see number 86 on the other line, and she demands that the Sector V operatives return to the Moonbase immediately. Number 1, though, thinks that number 86 just has another ice cream delivery mission in mind, and number 1 tells his teammates to end the call with the Moonbase. Number 86 is furious that Sector V hung up on her, but number 362 responds that they'll try to contact some other sectors because they're going to need plenty of help. We the viewers see that, Sticky Beard and his Candy Pirate crew are using multiple Candy Pirate space boats to attack the Moonbase. The main space boat is called the Sweet Victory. And we see that there are other villains present. The Dodgeball Wizard and Robin Food are examples that immediately come to mind. So after they end the video call with the Moonbase, number 1 tells his teammates that they're going to head back to the museum. And he also informs number 3 about what message to relay to Lizzie with regards to Lizzie's message. So the Sector V operatives do return to the museum, pardon me, yes. The Sector V operatives return to the museum, and they proceed to fight against the villains that are there. Number 1 in particular wants to use a technique that's supposed to take out 4 opponents at once, but number 1 never gets to demonstrate this technique because Mr. Boss orders the villains present to retreat. After the villains leave, number 101 is excited that Sector V has returned, and number 101 wishes to have autographs from them. He admits he already has their autographs, but he wants their autographs written in red. And he also admits that he's acquired some other items from the Sector V operatives, items from previous entries in the series. And number 1 is annoyed at the... number 1 figures that number 101 had apparently gone through his room, and he's not thrilled about this. But when number 101 leaves to go find a red writing utensil, the Sector V operatives decide to leave while they have the chance. But none of the characters present see what we, the viewers, see. The recommissioning module is missing now. So next up, we head back to the moon base, and we see that the Sector V operatives have used their 2x4 technology vehicle to reach the moon base. They're going to help out with the moon base now, and they do contact the moon base. Number 86 answers the call, and she's yelling at the Sector V operatives for hanging up earlier, but number 362 takes over, talking to the Sector V operatives, and explains that some of the functions of the moon base were destroyed during this attack. Number 1 inquires if the pretzel making capabilities are still functional, and number 362 answers that is the case, but wonders why. But number 1 doesn't bother to explain and ends the call because he's formulating a plan with his teammates. So the Sector V operatives, it looks like they're going to crash into the Sweet Victory at first, but then they miss the Sweet Victory at the last possible second. And then it looks like they're going to crash into the moon base, or a specific part of the moon base, I should say. Oh, and there's a countdown until the vehicle explodes. So the Sector V operative's vehicle crashes into the area of the moon base that creates pretzels, and the vehicle is filled with salt now, salt from the pretzel making functions. So the Sector V operatives manage to escape the vehicle, and number 1 manages to send the vehicle back to towards the Sweet Victory before he escapes. And so the vehicle lands on the Sweet Victory and explodes, which covers the Candy Pirates with salt, and they're not happy about this, and they decide to retreat. So after that happens, we do see that some of the operatives are repairing the moon base, and the Sector V operatives are in the main chamber, I guess you could call it, of the moon base. Number 362 is furious that number 1 disobeyed the orders to return to the moon base first, and instead went to the museum first. Number 1, though, insists that the museum was top priority because it's a monument to Numbuh Zero and the legacy that Numbuh Zero left behind. Number 362, though, number 362 responds that the museum attack was a distraction for the moon base. That, yes, the attack on the moon base was the main attack according to number 362, and the museum was a distraction, the museum attack. And number 362 points out that one villain was able to coordinate all the other members of their rogues gallery simultaneously, and that this is a very serious situation. Number 1, though, reiterates about the importance of Numbuh Zero's legacy and how Numbuh Zero is an example for multiple Kids Next Door operatives, including himself. Number 362, however, responds that Number 1 is a dreamer believing in a mere myth. And number 362 says that Number 1 was only able to save both the museum and the moon base because of luck. And number 362 compares luck to ice cream, saying neither lasts forever. Number 362 does also admit that she was going to promote Number 1 to the position of Global Tactical Officer, but because of Number 1's recklessness and relying on luck, she's going to give the position to number 86. Number 86 is very happy about this, and she rubs this in Number 1's face. And Number 1 is not amused by it, and even Number 362 looks like she's starting to regret promoting Number 86. But then Number 101 contacts, Number 101 then contacts the moon base, and he comments about how he still was hoping to get the red written autograph. And he says that he also happens to bring up that he thinks that's more important than any missing broken items. Like, he mentions the recommissioning module being stolen, but thinks there's no big deal because it's not a big deal because the module is apparently broken. But number 86 acts rather nervous when she hears this, And after the call ends, both number 1 and number 362 insist that number 86 say what's on her mind. Number 86 admits that the recommissioning module actually is functional despite what number 101 thinks. She admits that she used the recommissioning module on the 4 other Sector V operatives besides number 1 to restore their memories after the events of the Season 2 finale, Operation End, where number 274 had framed the Sector V operatives to be decommissioned. So that's how the 4 Sector V operatives who were decommissioned temporarily were restored of their memories. Number 86, though, figured that it was better if everyone thought that the recommissioning module was still damaged beyond repair, so she returned it to the museum afterwards. Number 1, though, and yes, number 1 figure, hearing this, yes, the operatives present realized that the recommissioning module could be used on a former Kids Next Door operative who might possibly be an adult now and thus know the secrets of the organization that the villains can use to their advantage. Number 1 decides to go off number 1 remembers hearing Mr. Boss mention a convention center. Yes, Mr. Boss mentioned to retreat to the convention center after they escaped from the museum. So number 1 figures where the villains are, and he goes charging off to try and reclaim the recommissioning module. Number 362, though, is angered by this, saying that they should have at least come up with a plan first. So the next scene takes us to the convention center, and we do see that Father was the one responsible for coordinating all of the adult villains in the Rogues Gallery, and he's giving a speech to the villains, and he rhetorically questions if they're wondering who is the greater evil than Father, but they take his rhetorical question literally and offer different answers before Father silences them. Father admits that the evil greater than him is Grandfather, and we do get to see Grandfather was hidden within a box that was also covered with a cloth, and when the cloth and the box are removed, we see what looks like a harmless old man, and the villains present are not impressed by the sight of this old man. Father clarifies, however, that Grandfather's current state is because his powers and his memory of his evil have been removed, and that's what the purpose of the recommissioning module is. It can restore any lost memories, and he intends to restore the lost memories of Grandfather so that Grandfather can bring the world to its knees like he did all those years ago. Number 1 managed to sneak into the convention center, but the rest of the Sector V operatives also arrive to try and warn Number 1. Number 1 responds, though, that they want to warn Number 1 against this solo mission, but Number 1 says it's his fault that the recommissioning module was taken, and he intends to rectify his mistake. But when Number 1 jumps down, he's captured by Kree, and Father reveals that he anticipated that Number 1 would be arriving to reclaim the recommissioning module even if it wasn't working. This surprises Number 1, and Father reveals to Number 1 that the DNA of a currently active Kids Next Door operative is required to make the recommissioning module work. And he says how appropriate that Number 1's DNA will be used to bring about Grandfather's lost memories and powers. And Father rubs it into Number 1's face by saying it's all Number 1's fault. The other Sector V operatives do try to help Number 1, but they're captured by Chad. So with the 2 teen ninjas capturing the Sector V operatives, Father picks Number 1's nose to take his booger and use it to power the recommissioning module. Father then uses the device on Grandfather, and Grandfather changes back into the form that we saw in the flashback scene at the beginning of the TV movie, the silhouette, the elderly man's living silhouette. Grandfather does thank Father for restoring his powers and memories, but then quickly demands that Father leave his sight. Grandfather responds that the only reason Father had restored his powers was because Father couldn't defeat the kids next door by himself. Grandfather then roasts Father in front of the other villains, and then he demands that Father leave yet again. And Father grumbles about this, and he tosses the recommissioning module into a trash can before he leaves the convention. While Grandfather is giving a speech, we see that he's changing the appearance of the center, the convention center, and the podium he's standing behind are changing into old-fashioned looks. Yes, the convention center now looks like an old-fashioned building. And Grandfather says that he's going to stop the kids next door by turning all the operatives into senior citizombies. And he also mentions that he'll be changing everyone who used to be a kid into senior citizombies. The present villains are cheering, but then they realize they used to be kids in the past. So yes, Grandfather intends to turn everyone into a senior citizombie. Kid, teen, adult, it doesn't matter. He's going to change them all to ensure his control. So Grandfather grabs the Toilinator, and when he does so, this changes the Toilinator into a senior citizombie. And yes, he doesn't have a pretty look to him, to say the least. And we soon see the Toilinator manages to grab Mr. Boss and Crazy Old Cat Lady, and they change into senior citizombies too. Yes, the senior citizombie transformation is like a plague. Grandfather doesn't have to be the only one who makes contact with someone physically to change them into a senior citizombie. Any senior citizombie that makes physical contact with another is able to turn someone into a senior citizombie. And quickly we see the villains are changing into senior citizombies. Chad panics when he sees this, and he actually escapes, which ends up freeing the 4 other Sector V operatives. Number 5 then distracts Kree in order to free Number 1, and Number 5 messes the rockets that Kree is using to fly around with, and Kree ends up crashing into Grandfather, which turns her into a senior citizombie. Number 5 tries to encourage Number 1 that they need to escape, but Number 1 is in despair over how his booger was used to power the recommissioning module, which in turn restored Grandfather's powers. So Number 5 does manage to push Number 1 off the stage, though, and she encourages the rest of the team to escape before she, Number 5, is turned into a senior citizombie by Kree. So after Number 2, Number 3, and Number 4 escape, Grandfather decides to begin his campaign of taking over the world. He leads the senior citizombies off to infect the other kids next door operatives and to get some tapioca before he begins the next phase of his plan, which involves finding the Book of KND. But after everyone leaves the center, the convention center, we see Number 1 is still there, and he's still in despair. So the next scene shows us a montage of Grandfather and the senior citizombies finding all the various tree houses in the world, and they're turning them all into giant old-fashioned tapioca factories, and the kids next door operatives are turned into senior citizombies too. So this is happening throughout the course of time, and we do see that Number 2, Number 3, and Number 4 have made it to the moon base. So the moon base sees this happening to all of the tree houses on Earth, and they're wondering what they're going to do. Number 2 suggests that there might be a way to counter it. Yes, Number 2 brings up the birthday suits, which they used back in Operation Graduates. And Number 2 says that he might be able to modify them with a special 2x4 technology. Yes, with special 2x4 technology, Number 2 thinks he can modify the birthday suits so that they can counter the senior citizombie effects. And he thinks that, but he does admit that this device is still at the Sector V treehouse. Number 3 and number 4 end up volunteering to go to the treehouse to get the device. And number 362 also mentions trying to get the Arctic base operatives to help out with defending to buy some time. But number 3 comments that it's not time they need a hero. Back at the convention center, number 1 is still in despair, and he tosses his sunglasses, thinking that he doesn't deserve them. But he knocks over the trash can that the that the recommissioning module is in, and he sees that he sees his booger in there. And number 101 happens to arrive. He still wants an autograph, but he mentions how number 1's booger has DNA similar to number 0. It turns out number 1 is related to number 0 in some way, and he can use the DNA tracker to find. He's determined to find number 10. Number 101 manages to encourage number 1 to use the DNA tracker to find number 0, because surely number 0 could be the one to defeat Grandfather like all those years ago. So number 1's spirit has been reignited. His spirit to defend the kids next door reignited. His spirit's reignited. Number 1 goes off with the DNA tracker and the recommissioning module to find number 0. And he also says he's given the red written autograph to number 101, but number 101 realizes that number 1 signed it with George Washington instead of his name or his code name or designated number. So back with the next scene takes us to the Sector V treehouse. And we do see that number 3 and number 4 have arrived at the treehouse, and they quickly find Tommy, who's there to help out. But things get bad once the Toilinator has arrived, and he turns Tommy into a senior citizombie. And so, yes, number 3 and number 4 do manage to escape from Tommy and the Toilinator, but then they find number 5, and number 5 is preparing to change them into senior citizombies, but she's distracted by some of the treehouse's hamsters that try to hold off number 5. But the hamsters are also affected by the senior citizombie virus, and they turn into senior citizombies too. And number 3 notices this when she hesitates, while number 4 rushes into a storage closet. Number 3 follows after number 4, and at this point in time, we the viewers only see their eyes. We don't see the rest of them, just their eyes. And number 4 is trying to figure out what they're gonna do. Number 3 suggests that they kiss. Number 4 acts like he's against the idea at first, but he decides to go through with it. But number 5 and the hamsters open the storage closet doors, and we the viewer see that number 3 is a senior citizombie. Number 4 realizes too late before he's infected by number 3, spreading the senior citizombie virus. Meanwhile, we see number 1 using the DNA tracker, and he eventually comes across his house. The tracker leads him back to his house, and when he opens the door, he finds his dad, who's excited to see number 1 again because he wanted to spend some time earlier. And number 1 thinks that there's a malfunction at first, but then he questions if number 0 rings any bells to his dad. His dad doesn't get much of a chance, or his dad thinks that this is some kind of word game, and afterwards, they're interrupted by the Toilinator arriving. Number 1 slams the door on the Toilinator, which number 1's dad thinks is rude to do to a guest, but number 1 decides to play this off as a game of tag. He says that the Toilinator wants to play tag, but the Toilinator can't touch number 1's dad. So number 1 leads his dad through their house, and they do come across Tommy and the hamsters that are infected by the the senior citizombie effects. And so number one manages to get his dad to his room, and he activates a security measure, and he also tries to use an escape pod, but that doesn't work because the hamsters messed up the wiring and circuitry, and they're trying to break through the door. Number one's dad is still oblivious to what's going on and suggesting some activities, but number one finally snaps at his dad to shut up, and his dad becomes sad by this, admitting he just wanted to have fun with his son. And when he leans back on part of the tree that's growing from number one's room, it opens up a doorway, and number one's dad falls through it. Number one quickly apologizes to his dad, admitting that he just snapped out of stress, but then he sees his dad gone in the open doorway in the tree and decides to take the chance to go down the tree. So he goes through the doorway in the tree, and it closes up when the hamsters break through into number one's room, and they can't find the Uno son and father duo. So the next scene takes us to the moon base. We're back at the moon base now, and they're trying to number 362, number 86, and number 2 are trying to contact number 3 and 4, and they find number 3 and 4 have now become senior citizombies. And then they start to kiss each other, which grosses the 3 operatives out. Number 86 actually destroys the video chat to end it, rather than just turn it off. And they figure that all they can do now is just try to update the birthday suits without the 2x4 technology that number 2 needed. It's their only chance. Number 362 also instructs number 86 to guard number 2 while he tries to repair the birthday suits or update the birthday suits. Number 362 tries to fight off the senior citizombies that have now invaded the moon base, including number 60. And despite her best efforts, number 362 is eventually turned into a senior citizombie. And afterwards, number 86 is still trying to guard number 2, but number 86 is eventually transformed into a senior citizombie, and then she infects number 2. So afterwards, number 362, now in senior citizombie form, contacts grandfather and tells him he now has control over the moon base. And most of the villains are cheering, but grandfather points out that they're not done yet. He still has to ensure that his victory is permanent by finding the Book of KND and destroying it. He says that the Book of KND contains the one thing more powerful than him, hope. He thinks if he can destroy hope, he can destroy any chance of anyone defeating him. And back with number one and his dad, they come across a chamber within the tree, and number one tries to tell his dad about the recommissioning module, and he's hoping that if they do this, they'll be able to save the world. Number one's dad says he's willing to do whatever makes his son happy, and says that they should give it a go. So number one uses the recommissioning module on his dad, and memories are flashing through Mr. Uno's eyes, and eventually Mr. Uno now stands with a more upright posture, and his eyebrows are now are not covering his eyes anymore. And yes, number one finds out for sure that his dad is Numbuh Zero. Numbuh Zero, he's amazed by this, and Numbuh Zero comments that number one's impressive skills had to come from somewhere. Numbuh Zero then inquires number one about what's going on, figuring it must be serious if he, Numbuh Zero, was recommissioned. Number one tells him quickly about the events involving grandfather, and Numbuh Zero does agree that is a very serious situation, but they're going to need some help, because Numbuh Zero admits that he couldn't defeat grandfather by himself. He still needed the help of others. Number one mentions, though, that all of the kids next door or the rest of the kids next door have pretty much become senior citi-zombies. But Numbuh Zero clarifies to his son that the help they're getting is not from the kids next door. So Numbuh Zero activates a secret passage, and this leads them to Father's mansion. Numbuh Zero rings the doorbell, and Father answers. And Father shows familiarity with Numbuh Zero, and he just invites them in, admitting that he doesn't really care about the state of the mess that's there. He's in a depressed state. Number one doesn't understand why they're going to Father, but Numbuh Zero simply tells his son that he may learn something important. Numbuh Zero then tells Father to take off the ridiculous outfit he's wearing. That's what he calls it. Father thinks he's talking about the bathrobe, but Numbuh Zero is talking about the silhouette suit, and he removes it, so now we get to see what Father looks like underneath the silhouette suit. Father's appearance resembles Mr. Wigglestein from Operation Archive and Daddy from Operation Pool, although his outfit's color scheme is mostly black and white, although there's a little red and yellow there too. And then Numbuh Zero and Father reveal to Number One that Father is Benedict Uno, the younger brother of Numbuh Zero, and so he's Number One's uncle. And Number One realizes this means grandfather is his literal grandfather. And Numbuh Zero tries to convince Father, Benedict, that they need to work together to defeat grandfather. He says that this could be Father's second chance. And he also says that he needs the help of Father's so-called children, in his words. And the delightful children from down the lane do arrive, intending to attack Number One and Numbuh Zero. But Father actually stops the delightful children. And while the delightful children insist that Number One is their greatest enemy, Father does admit that they do need to stop grandfather. He does blame himself for reawakening grandfather's powers. He says that while he figured that grandfather would be willing to share control of the world with him, grandfather just cast him aside, and so he's willing to fight against grandfather, and he manages to encourage the delightful children that they need to work together with their uncle Monty. So yes, Numbuh Zero's first name is Monty. The delightful children, though, intend to still attack Number One, so Numbuh Zero uses the recommissioning module on the delightful children, and we see that they are actually kids next door operatives. They're from a lost sector, Sector Z, and although it's not revealed in the TV movie, supplementary material reveals their designated numbers or code names to be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5. Father questions how Numbuh Zero knew the delightful children's true identities. Numbuh Zero comments that the skills the delightful children have demonstrated had to have been the skills of previous kids next door operatives. And we also find out that the results of the Sector Z operatives being delightfulized, the original delightfulization chamber that the Sector Z operatives were put into blew a fuse, which caused its power to increase to the point where the machine was destroyed, but the Sector Z operatives were permanently delightfulized. Numbuh Zero admits that the undone delightfulization is only temporary. He doesn't know how to undo the delightfulization for good. The Sector Z operatives are disappointed to hear this, but they decide that they need to make the most time that they have in order to they need to make the most of the time they have before the delightfulization effects return. And Numbuh Zero also admits that grandfather isn't going to stop until he destroys the book of KND. Hiding it again isn't going to work because grandfather is aware of its existence now. And they do come up with a plan, though we don't get to hear it just yet. We do see, however, grandfather and the senior citi-zombie army heading towards the direction of where grandfather can smell the book of KND. And it does lead them to Father's mansion, but they see one of the parts of Father's mansion heading off for the moon. Grandfather thinks that Father is just running away, but we see that Father and Number Zero are still in the mansion. Number One and the Sector Z operatives are the ones that left. And so Father is still nervous about fighting back against their dad, but Number Zero encourages him that they can work together this time. And this time, Father does accept the handshake. So Father and Number Zero go out of the mansion to confront Grandfather. Grandfather acknowledges Number Zero's existence while acting dismissive towards Father. Father tries to point out he's here too, but Grandfather uses some laser eye beams to blast Father, and Father becomes really angry. The silhouette suit returns, and Father is starting to let out a powerful fiery aura. Grandfather actually looks scared, and even Number Zero takes a few steps back, and Father looks like he's about to attack, but then he decides, forget it, he's just gonna go eat some Rocky Road ice cream instead. So he goes back into his mansion, and Grandfather, though, tries to talk to Number Zero afterwards, tries to convince him to just hand over the book of KND. But Number Zero says he's not going to leave the spot that he's in, so Grandfather proceeds to charge towards Number Zero. While that's happening, we see on the moon base, the Sector Z operatives are fighting off the senior Citizombies, while Number One tries to reach some controls on the moon base. And on the moon base, Number One is stopped by the senior Citizombie versions of his teammates. Number One is not willing to fight them, but he realizes he doesn't have a choice. He tries to reach out to them by bringing up past memories. He mentions how Number Five was the one who convinced Number One to join the Kids Next Door organization. He brings up how he helped Number Four against bullies on Number Four's first day of school. Number Three, he actually doesn't mention a memory with Number Three. He just calls her by her name, Kooky. And then for Number Two, Number One mentions that Number Two was his best friend since kindergarten. And Number One eventually is overpowered. He admits that he had a team to help him before, but the team isn't present now because they're his enemies. But the Sector Z operatives arrive after having taken care of the other senior Citizombies, and they fight off the senior Citizombie Sector V operatives while Number One tries to activate some sort of controls with the moon base. Yes, we see rockets emerging from the moon, and they're turning the moon base to face the Earth. That's what the controls are doing. And while they're in the middle of that, the Sector Z operatives do manage to defeat the senior Citizombie Sector V operatives. And during the fight, the closet where Number Two was working on the birthday suits opens up, and one of them falls on top of the now knocked out Number Two. Number One thanks the Sector Z operatives for their help, but the Sector Z operatives realize that their delightfulization is returning, and they request that Number One tell the others that they're going to miss them. And so the delightful children are back now, and they proceed to attack Number One. We do see Number Zero and Grandfather continuing to lock hands with each other during their struggle. Number Zero's hands look like the senior Citizombie hands, and his arms are starting to change that way. Grandfather, though, mocks Number Zero, saying he'll always be Zero to Grandfather. Number Zero, though, counters that his son is Number One. Number One manages to overpower the delightful children and sends them in a space pod out of the moon base. But because of the delightful children's attack, the targeting system that Number One was trying to set up is not working anymore. So he has to do it manually, but it requires 5 people to use pedal power. But Number One sees the birthday suits, and he gets an idea. Number One is able, or yes, we see that the birthday suits do work against the senior citizombie virus, but they only cover parts of the Sector V operatives. Yes, not all of the the birthday suits can't completely cure them. It only covers half of the different parts of the body. Like number 2, only the top half of number 2 is restored to his normal age. And I think half of number 5's face is still a senior citizombie. Number 4's hands are. So yes, the birthday suits are able to counter some of the senior citizombie virus, but not entirely. But it's enough in order to get the 4 other Sector V operatives to have control of themselves again. So they are able to work with number 1, and they fully aim the treehouse of the moon base towards Earth, and then they activate. Number 4 wonders what they're going to launch if there's no missiles, and then he finds out that they're going to launch the moon base towards the Earth. So the moon base is removed from the moon, and it's charging right towards where Grandfather and Number 0 are. During the struggle, Grandfather questions how Number 0 is able to resist him so. And Number 0 admits that the book of KND is in his back pocket. Grandfather immediately grabs the book, and the senior citizombie effects on Number 0 are wearing off. His hands and arms are back to normal. And Grandfather is gloating when he sees the moon base heading right towards him, but he doesn't get much of a chance to react. Yeah, the moon base comes crashing down on Grandfather, and afterwards, Number 0 is looking through the wreckage, and Grandfather emerges thinking that, did Number 0 really think that he was going to be able to crush Grandfather with the moon base? But Number 0 clarifies he was trying to get Grandfather into the decommissioning chamber, and he orders Number 1 to activate the trap now. So Number 1 activates the decommissioning process, which affects both Number 0 and Grandfather. Grandfather says that Number 0 is out of his will while he still has his evil powers. But afterwards, yes, Grandfather is back to being a harmless old man, and Number 0 is back to being clueless Monty Uno. But with Grandfather's powers removed, his effects on the world are also over. The senior citizombies are back to being their usual selves, and all of the tapioca factories are changed back into tree houses, and all is restored in the world. So the 4 other Sector V operatives leave to go fight off some of the villains that are still around the wreckage of the moon base. And Number 362 actually approaches Number 1. She admits that Number 1 was right to defend the museum, and admits that if Number 1 didn't disobey her orders, then they probably would have all been doomed. And she does admit how cool it is that Number 0 is not only real, but the father of Number 1. Number 1, though, admits that Number 362 had a point about how he, Number 1, had a tendency to put himself before the team. And he does admit that he did learn something important out of this. Number 362 offers the promotion that she intended to give to Number 1 before she gave it to Number 86. But Number 1 assures Number 362 that it's fine if Number 86 has the promotion because he'd prefer to stay with his teammates on Sector V. Number 362 is understanding of this, and Number 1 hopes to try and recommission Number 0. He finds the Book of KND and the recommissioning module nearby, but the recommissioning module falls apart, and a message from Number 0 appears. Number 0 admits that he was the one who destroyed the recommissioning module, and he admits that it would have been cool if he could still be in the Kids Next Door, and if he could join Number 1 on so many Kids Next Door adventures. But Number 0 admits that he's just not a kid anymore. Being an adult, he already has an important mission. That mission, to be a good father to his son. He tells Number 1 that Number 1 is the one who is now to guard the Book of KND, and he encourages Number 1 to let the other operatives have their chance to tell their stories. After the message is over, Number 1 can't help but break down into tears. and then his father approaches him, wondering what's going on. Number one, though, says he was reuniting with an old friend, and he hugs his dad. A month passes by, and we see that, we see that the moon base has been restored. It looks much bigger now compared to its previous form, and we see that a statue of Numbuh Zero is being created on the moon base. Number one narrates about how this was the true story of how he and his dad worked together to stop Grandfather, and now that he has the Book of KND, Number one was able to write his entry in the Book of KND. He only chose 5 words, but there's one difference between what he said before. The 5 words he chose to write in the book are, "We are Kids Next Door." And we do see a group shot of all the Kids Next Door operatives that are currently active operatives. And they've all gathered together with some 2x4 technology vehicles for a group shot. And that's how we end this TV movie. So there you go. This was the first, we've now discussed the recap and thoughts for the TV movie of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation Z.E.R.O. And yeah, that was a lengthy recap, but now we can focus on the thoughts section. And there's definitely a lot to talk about. So the big deal with this particular TV movie is that it reveals that Number One's dad was a Kids Next Door operative, a legendary Kids Next Door operative, in fact. And Tom Warburton did create a blog post dedicated specifically for some details regarding Operation Z.E.R.O. And he did mention how one of the staff members suggested the idea of Number One's dad being a legendary operative. And Tom Warburton and Mo Willems both liked this idea a lot, but they figured that this was an idea that they couldn't just have in a segment, not even a full episode. They needed a movie for this kind of story. And eventually that opportunity came with this TV movie. And we do get a few other details with this blog post that Tom Warburton provided. He did mention that at one point in time, a grandmother character was actually going to be featured in the TV movie, but she was eventually, she ended up not being in the final draft of the TV movie because things got really complicated. That's along the lines of what Tom Warburton said. And I can't help but wonder, what would grandmother have been like? Yes, I'm definitely curious about grandmother, and it does bring up another detail in mind. Yes, a lot of fans have speculated about if there would be a mother character similar to father. Like, we know they considered the idea of a grandmother, but yeah, had they ever considered the idea for mother? I'm not sure. Now, maybe there's a chance that mother or grandmother could appear in the sequel series or the spin-off series. That is to say, if it does get greenlit, of course. But I guess we'll just have to be patient and see. We'll just have to keep our fingers crossed that the sequel series or spin-off series ever does see the light of day. And yeah, I'm hoping that maybe there's a chance that they could go into greater detail about that. But yes, in any case, we did get to meet Grandfather. He's the villain who is higher up than Father on the villain hierarchy. And this TV movie also did show Father being the one to coordinate all of the other villains. Usually, Mr. Boss is presented to be the leader of the adult villains, but yeah, like I said, I think that's more because Mr. Boss is probably the more sociable between him and Father. But yes, I think this TV movie made it very clear that the other villains will turn to Father or let Father call the shots when he has something in mind. And boy, did he have something in mind here. And with Grandfather, yes, Grandfather is even more powerful, or supposedly, I should say. I should clarify that. Yes, in any case, though, Grandfather was the bigger bad or greater scope villain, if you prefer, of the franchise. Now, with the detail about Grandfather being necessarily more powerful than Father, well, the scene where Father was actually anchored by Grandfather, and it looked like he managed to terrify Grandfather, and even Numbuh Zero was kind of taking a few steps back. This suggests that Father might have the potential to actually be more powerful than Grandfather. Yes, he might have the potential to actually be stronger than Grandfather, considering how he scared Grandfather. But alas, nothing really came of that because Father decided to give up and go eat some Rocky Road ice cream instead. And yeah, a lot of fans do feel that was a missed opportunity, and I have to agree, that was a real missed opportunity that we didn't get to see Grandfather go up against and Father. Yes, I would have liked to have seen Numbuh Zero and Father work together against Grandfather, and I would have especially liked to see a showdown between Father and Grandfather. I think it would have been rather cathartic to see Father lay a beat down on Grandfather, actually. So, yeah, I guess it was done for the sake of humor, but even when I was a kid who first watched the TV movie, my thoughts were along the lines of, oh, come on, that would have been cool. I wanted to fight. I wanted to see them fight. But, yeah, I mean, and for what it's worth, though, yeah, some of the later entries, or the series finale, I should say, yes, the series finale does show Father in a powerful light. So, yeah, this suggests Father may actually have the potential to be stronger than Grandfather, but he never really reached that potential because of Grandfather's actions. And this does help us to understand why Father acts the way that he does. It doesn't excuse his actions, mind you. Numbuh Zero went through the same thing, but he turned out to be a good person despite the bad parts of his life. But it does help us to understand. And again, understanding someone's actions is not the same as agreeing with someone's actions. And besides that, yes, so we know Father is related to Number One now. They're actually uncle and nephew. And the Delightful Children are Number One's adoptive cousins. And I use adoptive in a loose term because, yes, they're actually the Sector Z operatives that have been turned into the Delightful Children from down the lane. And this brings up an interesting detail, though. Some fans were wondering, how was Tommy able to, why weren't the Delightful Children affected by the animalization ray when they were initially, when the animalization ray was initially in effect? Why weren't they turned into animals, since they actually were Kids Next Door operatives? It was only after Tommy put their booger into the code module during Operation Graduates when they were considered Kids Next Door operatives. The best answer I can think of is that the delightfulization process must have altered their DNA to the point that the code module just treated the delightfulized DNA differently from the non-delightfulized DNA. And with regards to the Sector Z operatives, the TV movie did reveal the tall boy's name to be David. I did mention the names of the Delightful Children revealed so far as of the recording of this video back in Operation Undercover. Yes, Operation Undercover revealed Lenny to be the name of the boy with the football helmet, and this TV movie revealed David to be the name of the tall boy. And yeah, I did mention it before, but I guess I'll mention it again. The blonde boy's name was revealed to be Bruce on one of the blog posts of Tom Warburton. And the Rainbow Monkeys website did reveal the girl with pigtails name to be Constance. So as of the recording of this video, the girl with the bow is the only delightful child whose name has not been revealed yet. Most fans call her Ashley, although I myself always called her Emma as the fan nickname I came up with her. But yes, her official name has not been revealed yet while I'm recording this, so we'll just have to be patient and see if her name does eventually get revealed. In the Operation Zero blog post, Tom Warburton did admit that the actual script for this TV movie does have all their real names on it, so who knows if anyone can ever get their hands on that script, but that's likely to be a very hard objective to pull. So otherwise, what else can we say? Yes, this TV movie also was notable because it did introduce another character, although he had a brief role. Number 362's younger brother, Number 363, briefly appeared during the museum tour, and we will see him again. He may or may not have a few cameo appearances in season 6, but he is going to appear in the series finale. That much I can say. And without giving too much else away, let's just say if you thought he was unpleasant here, he's going to be a lot more unpleasant in the series finale. And yeah, that's it actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I know some fans felt that number 362 being skeptical about Numbuh Zero's existence, they thought that was an example of arbitrary skepticism. They thought it seemed peculiar that number 362 would doubt the existence of a legendary Kids Next Door operative, considering all the weird stuff that happens in their universe. Although some fans also noted it was actually not so different from number 1, who showed some arbitrary skepticism back in Season 2's Operation Space. Number 1 seemed to doubt the existence of aliens, even though a lot of weird stuff happens in their universe. You draw the lines at aliens. But yeah, some fans thought it was pretty amusing how number 1 and number 362 had some not so different moments. And this TV movie also did help to kind of highlight the bond between number 1 and number 362. They clearly do show that they have a great bond as friends and fellow Kids Next Door operatives, which we saw back in Operation It too. But this TV movie also showed us that it doesn't get in the way of some of their strong thoughts about other matters with regards to the organization. Like, number 362 isn't afraid to put her foot down with number 1 or the rest of Sector V for that matter, while number 1, on the other hand, doesn't have a problem with going against number 362's orders if he thinks there's a greater priority. So it does help to highlight that their bond doesn't get in the way of what they think is important. And at the end, they were both able to recognize their mistakes. Yes, it was an example of both sides have a point. Number 362 admitted that number 1 disobeying orders actually ended up saving them, while number 1 did acknowledge that number 362 was right about the fact that he was putting himself before the team. So that was pretty good. They were able to recognize their own mistakes and also recognize the valid points of the other. And like I said, that definitely helped with some fans of the courting commanders pairing. And yeah, maybe it wasn't as pronounced compared to Operation It, but yeah, I would say there were some hints for the courting commander pairing here. Otherwise, the moon base now has a new look to it, and we'll be seeing that new look throughout Season 6. Now, besides that, though, there's only... Yes, there are 2 other non-episodes or segment entries for Codename Kids Next Door, and at least one of them would be considered a TV special. I've seen the series finale. Some argue if it would count as another TV movie or if it would count as a TV special. Personally, I count that as a TV special. I consider the series finale to be a TV special. So in my perspective, this is the only TV movie for Codename Kids Next Door, while the other 2 non-episode, non-segment entries are TV specials. And I'll be covering the recap and thoughts for those entries after I cover Season 6. So there you go, yeah. So that's how we're going to be covering those entries. We'll be covering Season 6, and then we'll cover the 2 TV specials on this channel. That's the plan with regards to the rest of Codename Kids Next Door. And otherwise, that's about it, I would say. That was definitely on the lengthy side, the longest one yet. But yes, the recap alone was quite lengthy, and there were definitely a lot of details to talk about with this particular TV movie. It was definitely interesting to see number 1's dad's backstory and find out that he's related to father, and we get to find out about their dad, grandfather. And we did get a few introductions for some characters who go on to play an important role, and we do get some backstory for the delightful children from down the lane. That's right, yeah, I guess there is also that speculation. Some fans are wondering if maybe if the delightfulization process might have actually halted the aging of the delightful children. Some think that the delightful children might be chronologically older than they biologically are, but the delightfulization process halted their biological aging. So the speculation comes from Numbuh Zero figuring the Sector Z operatives were the delightful children, and some fans have speculated that the shadowy characters that helped Numbuh Zero originally might have been the Sector Z operatives. Yeah, that's just speculation. I don't know for sure if that is the case, but yes, there is speculation that suggests that the delightful children might actually be stuck as kids in a biological sense and might be chronologically older. But at the very least, this TV movie also does clarify Father's actual origins and reveals that, yeah, it looks like Operation Archive from season 3 really was just number one's conspiracy theory, despite the ending of the segment regarding Mr. Frybingle contacting someone. So, yeah, this was what contradicts Operation Archive that I mentioned before. So, yeah, there we go for now. So, we had some interesting revelations in this TV movie. There were definitely a lot of cool details, but I do admit there were quite a bit of missed opportunities too. I would have liked to see Father, like I said, I would have liked it if Father did work with Numbuh Zero against Grandfather, and I would have liked a fight between Father and Grandfather. And I also thought it was a shame that outside of the TV movie, they don't really acknowledge number one's and Father's relation to each other as nephew and uncle. That doesn't really get brought up again. It does feel like the Uno family tree. Yeah, it feels like a missed opportunity that they didn't really follow up with the Uno family tree outside of the TV movie. But despite those, I still thought that this was a good movie overall. I did really enjoy this TV movie, and yes, and yeah, it had a lot of nice surprises, even if there were some missed opportunities. But there we go. That was a long one, but we've discussed it now. So as of this video, we've now discussed the TV movie for Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time,